Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done listening to The Bone Shard Daughter. This is book 1 of the Drowning Empire series by Andrea Stewart, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was just right now. So I like this book a lot. I'm going to give it a 4 stars. It certainly had some problems, but overall, I thought it was a very well done book, and I enjoyed myself for large portions of this thing. The book had, decent enough writing and characters, with an interesting enough plot, with a nice amount of mystery involved in it, but it falls a little bit tad flat on the story due to its over-reliance on very common tropes that brings nothing new, and at times kind of treats the reader as someone who's not really used to reading this genre. And maybe that's the intended audience. I don't know. I can only speak to this book as myself. But as somebody who's read, many hundreds of fantasy books, it did kind of beat me over the head with some basic stuff. But, it's not the worst thing in the world. And overall, 4 stars I thought was very well done. I would say overall, though, this book is ultimately saved and leaves me with a positive impression due to the absolutely wonderful world building that was done in this story. I don't know where I heard of this story. This book was not thrust upon me by any outside source. I do a lot of avenues on this channel for people to have a say in what books I read. Every month, members of my Patreon can vote on a book for me to read. They can also put a book into a wheel, and I spin it, and I have to read whatever they choose, and that can end up with some wild choices, like reading a Sarah J. Maas book last month. And I also, people that win the TBR contest can also pick any book for me to read. But this one, I'm always looking for audiobooks to read. My problem a lot is that when a book is overly complicated, I like to read it in a physical format because I can get kind of lost when I'm doing audiobooks. I need something a little bit more straightforward on audiobooks. And people told me this is a really well done audiobook. I think what they meant when they said that, though, was that the audiobook narration itself was very well done, which it is. The audiobook narration here is done by many different voice actors, which is really cool. It's so rare that you get that in an audiobook. Almost always you get a single voice actor. And it can end up a little strange when a voice actor is doing a different gender than they are, for example, or too many voices, and their range is not enough to do too many different voices. But when you have essentially 3 different point of views here, and each of them have their own voice actor, it can get really entertaining. But they told me that because of that, right? But it is a little bit more complicated. And I did have to stop myself at times after I was done listening to a section to kind of go back, either listen to it again, look up a little bit of the story so I could, keep up to pace. But yeah, a very good audiobook experience, I will say. Although, not to get too far off track here, but one of the narrators is the woman who narrated the Poppy War. And nothing against the audiobook narrator. I think the audiobook narrator did a fine job with the Poppy War. But I hated the Poppy War so much, especially the last book, that I had this negative impression of the Poppy War kind of coming in my head every time this audiobook narrator came on. But that's definitely a map problem and not a audiobook narration problem. So let's talk a little bit about this story. And the story is essentially, like I mentioned, told through the point of view of 4 different characters, but 3 of them take 95% of the book. There's a 4th that's just very, very, very minor here, but so I'll focus on the 3. So the story takes place in an empire consisting of many different islands. On these islands, there's this bone shard magic that's wielded by the emperor, and he fuels these constructs that enforce law and order. So what this means is, and the way the magic system works is the empire rules by force. He has terrified everybody about outside forces, and so he's told them all that they need to give themselves up so that he can use their bodies for magic. And the way that works is he has these festivals where he will take a single, maybe more, but I think a single bone from their body, and use it to construct these not really alive, but kind of alive, magical kind of beasts that work for him as his spy master to enforce law and order. And he's got tons of these things. But when he uses them, it makes the person die a lot faster. And it's not great for the public to be doing this. Now, the emperor has reigned for a very long time, like decades and decades and decades, but he is declining in health rapidly, and his daughter, who is his heir, is doing everything she can to earn her father's trust so she could eventually take over. But she has lost her memories before this book has started, and she's trying to get them back. Now, I hate this trope. I've always hated it. I always feel like when an author does this whole amnesia thing, it's done as a device so they don't have to tell you too much backstory, so they can keep some mystery in the story. And while I still hate it, I found this one to be a little bit more well done because without ruining anything, when you do start to find out about that backstory a little bit, it's kind of a wow moment. And you know, I get these moments in other books where they do that amnesia thing, and while there might be a little bit of a wow moment in general, it's underwhelming when you finally understand the reason for the amnesia. It definitely, again, no spoilers, but it is very satisfying when you finally do start to uncover the mystery here, and you really do understand that there really would be no other way to tell this story unless the author used this device. So, Andrea Stewart, I forgive you for the use of amnesia in this. It worked. Don't love it, but it works. So meanwhile, the story also tells this tale of a smuggler that quickly turns into a child rescuer. You know, he's this Han Solo type of like this rogue bad boy who's trying to elude the Empire and a crime syndicate at the same time. And thirdly, you have this character who is the daughter of a local governor. So originally you had the daughter of an emperor. Now you have the daughter of a local governor, far lower on the totem pole, but still, you know, somewhat significant. And this character is in love with a commoner, a local, like, low-born woman. And so there's, like, an LGBT thing. Is that how you say it? I don't want to offend anybody, but I feel like I said it right. That there's that aspect here, but it's really just a very kind of bare bones love story that you've probably read or watched in movies a million times, where somebody powerful falls in love with somebody who is not, and the trials and tribulations that go with that. Now, all of these stories end up getting combined before this story is finished. You know that will happen because this is a fantasy book, and that's the way fantasy books work. But again, satisfying when it happens, and it makes sense when it happens, and it really ties the story together and makes us feel like a complete novel instead of several different parts that, you know, are interesting on their own right, but, you know, felt very disparate. So I did appreciate that it does kind of come together. So before we go into the specific aspects of what make this story a fun read, let's talk about the sponsor of this video. So, it's the new year and a great time to work on yourself. Personally, my big goals for 2024 are the same goals that I've had for the past few years. I want to continue to work on being a better father to my son and daughter and a better husband to my wife. And therapy can help achieve these goals by helping gain a better perspective and understanding to my own emotions and behaviors, as well as those of my family. And I should know my wife happens to be a marriage and family therapist. So insert BetterHelp, which is the sponsor of this video. And BetterHelp makes starting therapy easier and much less intimidating for a lot of people. So BetterHelp lets you have therapy sessions as a phone call, as a video chat, or even messaging, whatever is the most comfortable version of therapy for you. BetterHelp can match you to one of over 30,000 therapists in their network based on your needs, your preferences, and location, which gives you access to a wider range of expertise than may be available in your city. So join over 4 million people who've used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/fantasybook to get started. You'll fill out a questionnaire that will ask you questions about what challenges you're going through and what kind of therapist you'd like, and then BetterHelp can match you with a therapist to help you. You'll be matched with a therapist in most cases within 48 hours. Clicking that link helps support this channel, and it goes to get you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp so you can connect with a therapist to see what helps for you. All right, so now back to the book. Now let's talk world building, my favorite part of this book. The world building here was crazy well done. I didn't quite realize that the world building was so well done until I worked, a decent way through this book. But as I got into this, I'm going around the day just thinking about this world more. And that, I know there's like a ton of definitions for what good world building is, but for me, that's the most core definition. Does it stick with me? Does it fill me with a sense of wonder? And it absolutely does. I mean, this world feels very real. It feels huge. And unfortunately, I kind of wish that I read this book in a physical format, because I bet there's a map that I would love to kind of look around and see where everything connects. An audiobook, I can't do that. And I have trouble visualizing maps in my head when I don't get to see them first. If I look at them, then maybe I can connect them a little bit more, but I like to study maps. I like to really check them out. So I'm sad that I wasn't able to do that, because everything felt so alive and connected. I mean, the different locations felt very obviously unique in their setting. It just felt so real. And I love what was done there. I'm going to keep thinking about this world, and everything that can go on in it, that's gone on, that could go on in the future, for a really long time. And I can't wait, to read this book again someday, and to continue the series, so I can really, live it all and kind of get through it again. The magic here was interesting. I mean, so the bone shard magic felt a little odd, because it's a very, is it a hard magic system? It feels kind of soft. I mean, it explains like where the magic comes from, but not at all how it, it's just kind of like, yeah, now you do it. So I guess that's kind of the definition of a soft magic system, but it's not like a Merlin where you just like can do it. There's some explanation of what it is. But the idea that this magic is all to run these constructs is, it just never really grabbed me like it should. Now, there's other fantasy elements here that I felt were interesting, namely this 𝐿𝐿 character. 𝐿𝐿 is this pirate rogue character. And I don't want to ruin what happens, but he does come across this magic, like kitten-like character, and it sounds silly, but you quickly fall in love with this character. And it has magic of its own. It can empower other people to kind of have magic. And so the 𝐿𝐿 character was the most interesting. Which is strange, because it's not the part that I feel like you're supposed to think is the most interesting. You're supposed to be enamored by this bone shard stuff. It's in the title of the book, or the series. And is it the series or the book that is named that? I think it's the book. So yeah, I didn't love it. And the way that it impacted the plot wasn't great. I mean, there was just some kind of groany moments involving the magic, but yeah, it's okay. The characters. Now, the characters I feel like were good, not great, certainly not bad. I connected with some of them more than others, which I think is true for any multi-POV story, but I wasn't, deeply in love with them. Now, I did really like this 𝐿𝐿 character, and I did find that I ended up liking the two women characters a lot more as I got further into the story, because they felt a little one-dimensional at the start of this story. But eventually they get some depth to them. They both go through personal crises. They have to overcome them. And as they do that, they kind of turn into different people, as they get a better understanding of themselves and the world and the people around them. And it was that point where I find myself liking them a lot more. But I didn't fall in love with them out of the gate. I found one of them, the Emperor's daughter, the one that the book is kind of named after, to be particularly kind of weak, because she I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to say this without spoiling things, but there's a pivotal moment in the story where she decides to take ownership of her life and, make decisions selfishly, which you're kind of cheering for her to do. And as she does that, she quickly goes from totally unknowledgeable about the magic in this world to instantly genius level. And it was a very unbelievable character arc that I felt like could have been stretched out a significantly longer way. Now, it probably would have been boring to do that. It was more action-packed to do it this way, but it left me kind of being like, come on, And so I guess it's not so much the character, it's more like the plotting itself just felt like it rushed along too quickly. It went slow at the beginning, but then it just went too fast. But, that's okay. Good characters, not great. The prose here, again, good. 3 to 4 stars if I was to give a specific star rating to the prose. Nothing that's going to blow me away. It's not poetic. It's not this purple prose, which is that kind of a slander? Is it not good to say purple prose? But but it's certainly not that. But it's not bad, and didn't, make me obsessed with the story and didn't draw me out of it. So I guess which is most stories, right? Most stories have that average kind of prose in it. But yeah, it didn't hurt the story at all. So ultimately, I will probably keep reading this series. I'm worried because people tell me that the series goes downhill quickly. Now, people have been wrong about that. In general, they're kind of right, though. Because usually the people that end up reading the second book liked the first book. And so they're the ones that I can trust the most to give me that opinion. So yeah, I'll probably read the next one, but if it's not good, I'll stop. But if it is, then for sure I'll finish out this trilogy, because leaving a trilogy 2/3 of the way done is just very hard for an OCD kind of person like me. And so who would I recommend it to? I don't know that there's a specific type of person that I'd recommend it to. I'm struggling to figure out another book that it's like. Certainly in that multi-POV kind of area. And it sounds like I don't like it when I say that I'm struggling with who to recommend it to, but there's nothing else that I've read that's so terribly similar to it. There's other, multi-POV stories that deal with this different characters kind of coming together and leaving each other, but the ones that I'm thinking of are way darker than this story, and ultimately don't feel connected to it, and you wouldn't necessarily like this one just because you like that one. But I'd say if you watch this review and you found interest in anything that I'm saying, then yeah, check it out. It's a good story. I definitely put my stamp of approval on it. I just don't feel like over the moon about it. So that's it for me. I've talked for a long time. I'm going to cap it off from there. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗏𝘅𝑒𝐿𝑒𝑐𝑖𝑎, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Harry B, Joe, Cat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.